Do you enjoy building Lego sets but absolutely shudder at the price of them in this economy? Well, never fear, for a fraction of the price, you can have about half of the fun in today's game. My name is St. Corvus, and this is my review of Lego Batman, the video game. Look, full disclosure before we start the review, I have to say that I'm not the biggest Lego guy out there. When I was a kid, I used to collect a lot of the Lego cars that you could pull back and then they'd race ahead. And I'd try to build some stuff with a tub of miscellaneous bricks I had, but I just never really had the flair for being able to make something out of nothing. I do have one Lego set in my house, which is a lovely little Lego bonsai tree that I was gifted and cherished deeply, but other than that, I don't actually have any Lego collection of my own. That's not to say I wouldn't like more, but when you get things like the Batman Arkham Asylum kit costing $500 and you see the price of those recent Pokemon Lego sets that were announced, I feel like there's just a lot more things I'd rather be putting my money into. I do like Lego though. A close relative of mine has a very large Lego Star Wars collection that I love seeing and talking to them about, and maybe one day I'll make a dedicated section for housing more sets. What I am a big fan of, however, is Batman, so when I needed a little filler game to play on my live stream for a few days, I figured that Lego Batman might be a cool time. After all, there is that awesome looking new game that just recently got announced and is coming out mid-2026, right? What better time to jump in? I've only played a small amount of Lego games myself. Back on the Nintendo DS, I did play a couple hours of one of the Star Wars entries, and I think I might have played a few hours of the Indiana Jones game. Plus, when I got my PlayStation Vita way back in the day, it came with a digital download for Lego Harry Potter Years 5 to 7, which I fully played through and thought was a cool little bit of fun. My community, as it turns out, are a couple of little glazers for the Lego Batman games, and told me that the Batman entries are the best ones in the franchise. So let's take a look and see what I thought of the first game here. I hadn't realised until I booted it up and started playing it that Lego Batman here is actually quite an old game, having released back in 2008 and came out on PC, Nintendo DS, PlayStation 2 and 3, PSP, Nintendo Wii and Xbox 360. As it turns out, this game and pretty much all of the main Lego entries are developed by Traveller's Tales, which happened to be one of the development studios that gave me some of my childhood favourite games like Muppet Race Mania, Toy Story 2, and Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex. Back in the days of the 2000s, when games like these released on so many platforms, it was all too common that some entries, such as the DS or PSP ones, would be entirely different games, and I'm not sure if that's the case here or not, but for clarity's sake, today, we're taking a look at the PC version of Lego Batman. So Lego Batman was actually a bit of a big deal when it comes to the story. The reason being for this is that this is actually the very first of these licensed Lego games to have its own original story, and not be based on the stories of a movie. With that being the case, is the story any good? Well, no, not really. I have to be fair to the game since these were lower budget license games, but there's not a lot here when it comes to the story. Batman's entire rogues gallery has escaped from Arkham Asylum and they're wreaking havoc on Gotham City. Oh good heavens Batman, what do we do? You go through the levels and beat them. That's pretty much it. That's the whole story. There's no actual real plot here. No dialogue sequences since there's no voice acting and no text dialogue outside of mission intros. You just play as the crime-fighting duo Batman and Robin, going level by level and taking down whatever villain is at the end of it. This isn't to say that the game is lacking in personality per se. At the start and end of every level, you'll get a little cutscene and these are absolutely full of personality and humour, usually of the slapstick variety. These are pretty fun, but you're still not really going to be getting any narrative here. That's not all you'll get though, since whenever you finish an episode of the story with Batman and Robin, you'll unlock the villain side of the story leading up to Batman and Robin's story, which means even more fun little cutscenes of Lego humour. That's really all there is to say about the narrative of the game. You'll take Batman and Robin through different sections of Gotham City, enjoy some silly little cutscenes, then move on to the next one. There's not a big emphasis on the story with this game. It does do a good job of hitting the theme of Batman and really capturing the spirit of the villains you're fighting with how the levels are done, but don't be coming to this game for its story. Rather, let's talk about how it plays. So what kind of game actually is Lego Batman? Well, since I've never covered a Lego game on the channel, let me break it down for you. This game is part 3D platformer, part puzzle game, part collectathon, and part action game. Some of these aspects I have to admit the game does quite well, and others I have to say I was a bit let down by. As with a lot of LEGO games, this can be played entirely solo with you switching between the two available characters per level, but can also be played entirely co-op. While I did my whole playthrough solo, I can't help but feel like this game should pretty much only be played in co-op. It would make a really fun game to go through with a friend, and the puzzles would work out so much better since the partner AI is honestly pretty terrible at making sure it's doing its half of the puzzles. As I mentioned, the game is split into two halves, with the first half being the hero's side with Batman and Robin, and the second half being the villain side where you'll play as a whole slew of villains such as Clayface, Riddler, Joker, and Bane. Each side of the story is made up of 3 episodes, which contain 5 levels each, so 15 levels per side of the story, and 30 unique levels total, which I think is actually a really good amount considering the length of them. Each and every level in the game has a variety of things you'll be doing. There's your typical platforming, which feels good and responsive, characters control well and don't feel too floaty or light. As you go through the levels, you'll be doing the typical LEGO game gimmick of building items with the LEGO bricks you find on the ground. Sometimes you'll have to actually destroy things in the environment to be able to have the pieces available to put things you need to together, but this is where the puzzle element of the game comes in. Something in the level might be barring your progress, so you have to find something you can break and reassemble to remove the obstacle. This is what the LEGO games do best, keeping you on the fly by having the player always interacting with the environment because you never know what you might be able to destroy to be able to rebuild something else that'll help you in the level. A large part of the puzzle aspect comes in the way of different suits that you can obtain for both Batman and Robin, from things such as a glide suit that let Batman glide over gaps, a magnetic suit for Robin that lets him climb metal surfaces, and a remote suit for Batman that can let him place small bombs that can destroy metal objects. There are quite a few suits that can be found throughout the game, and sometimes part of the fun is going back a few rooms in a level and using a suit you just got to be able to solve a puzzle you couldn't at the time. It does give the game a very slight hint of a Metroidvania vibe that I actually like a bit. The villains in the villain side of the story don't have access to things like different costumes the same way that Batman and Robin do, but each villain has its own buffs and abilities that make them unique. Bane can lift really heavy objects with handles, Harley Quinn can double jump, and Poison Ivy can walk through poison waste, just to name a few. Unless you're playing through this game as quickly as possible to see its bare-bones story, you're probably going to be spending the majority of your time in the game on collecting things, because as with a lot of 3D platformers, there are a ton of things to collect in this game. Every single destructible item in the game will give you basic LEGO studs, which are your currency, but can also be collected to fill in a bar that if you fill, will give you either the superhero or supervillain status for that level. Each level in the game also has 10 mini-kits, which require quite a bit of puzzle solving to find, and a very well hidden red brick to find. While these aren't important to collect at all unless you want to go for 100%, I found that it was almost impossible to not try to find as many of these as I possibly could on my playthrough of each and every level. I couldn't help myself but interact with everything possible to try and find as much as I could, and I don't know how anyone else could avoid collecting everything they can either. The last part of the regular gameplay that you'll be doing is fighting in combat against thugs, police, or level bosses. I have to say that this is by far and wide the weakest part of the game. The combat is incredibly basic. You have one button which performs a basic attack combo, and you just mash it until the enemies are defeated. Enemies will almost always have projectile weapons such as guns, and it's almost impossible to not take damage while you're comboing someone, but enemies drop enough health refills that it's not much of a problem. Some of the villains you can play as will actually have their own projectile weapons such as guns that can be a little cool, but the gameplay still never gets any more deep than just mash the attack button. Batman and Robin do have batarangs that can be used for ranged combat and puzzle solving, but you have to hold down the button for so long before you can target and throw it that it's almost never actually usable. What I've found to be the most disappointing aspect of the combat is that when you're fighting a boss hand to hand, if you're just hitting the attack button to do your combo while they're doing the same to you, you'll take no damage and instead just do damage to them every 5 seconds or so. And it just felt so brainless that it sucked any of the fun that could have been had in these boss fights. I much preferred the ones that were giant puzzles instead to be able to hit the villains. Each episode in the game for both the heroes and villains does feature a level that gives you an entirely different experience from what I've mentioned so far, and that's because these levels are vehicle levels. You'll have some levels where you'll be driving cars such as the Batmobile, sailing boats, and even flying planes. I wish I could say that all these vehicle levels are equally as fun as each other, but that would be a lie. I think that the car levels are fun to play with good objectives and control fairly well, but the boat levels are an absolute nightmare as far as the controls go and how the boats feel, and the plane levels are such a frustrating experience with how easily things can one-hit kill you and how hard it is to avoid them since the movement is so sluggish. If the LEGO Batman sequels feature vehicle levels, I sincerely hope they tightened up the controls to give a better overall experience, because while I thought vehicle levels were cool at first, I very quickly learned to groan whenever one came around. Whether you're playing as the heroes or the villains, after each episode is complete, you'll return to your hub level. It's here that you can access a computer terminal to be able to spend your LEGO stud currency on some really cool things such as new characters, suit upgrades, game cheats or special effects, and trivia about Batman lore. All of these are super fun to buy. Through this you can unlock characters such as Nightwing, Alfred, Jim Gordon or Batgirl, and some of the upgrades are things like being able to target more things with the batarangs or to be able to throw them faster. I found that throughout my entire playthrough, I always had a slew of things that I could spend my studs on, and that made my time collecting them feel all the more worthwhile. You see, this game doesn't just contain its story mode. There's actually a whole nother mode you can play once you've finished all the levels in an episode in LEGO Batman, called Free Play. In Free Play mode, you can enter a level with whatever character you like, such as being able to take in Nightwing instead of Robin. Not only is this really fun being able to play as your personal favourites, but LEGO Batman does something with this mode that I actually really enjoy. As long as you have enough people unlocked and available, the game will actually always give you a whole batch of characters that you can swap through at the press of a button in the level, and it'll always give you at least one character with each main puzzle ability, so that when you go back into a level in free play mode, you'll be able to do every puzzle that the level offers. Free play feels like the game finally hitting its stride, giving the player complete freedom with how they play through a level and having every opportunity to do every puzzle and find everything they can, since story mode limits your abilities and it isn't possible to 100% complete any level in story mode. I just wish that I found the game mechanics fun enough to actually keep playing and collecting everything in free play, but after 2 or 3 levels, I was pretty much done and tapped out. I did get a solid 15 or so hours out of my playthrough though, which for the price that this game goes for these days, I will say that the playtime was satisfactory, and there is a lot of extra replay value to be found. Being a Batman game, one of the most important aspects of the experience is going to be the design. From things like the art design of the levels, the designs of the LEGO versions of heroes and villains, to the soundtrack, it's so important to absolutely nail all of these aspects when you take a licensed property as huge as Batman. I'm pleased to say that this game might not smash it out of the park here, but it does pretty well with what it can. Speaking on the levels, with 15 levels to play in the hero mode and then an alternative version in the villain mode, the level design is definitely strong from start to finish. Across your playthrough, you're going to be puzzling and platforming a huge variety of places such as Gotham streets, zoo, botanical gardens, an ice cream factory, and the docks, just to name a few. While none of these locations are particularly recognisable to any other games or movies or anything, they all feel very in character for a game like this, and each level does match its villain very well, and give a decent variety of areas to play through and things to look at. Being a game that's currently 18 years old as of the time of this review, I can't really say that there's any part of the graphics that really still stands out. The game still looks decent thanks to its simple art style, but there wasn't really anything graphically that stood out to me. The Lego-ified versions of fan favourite characters are always so funny to look at. Some characters like Joker translate really well to Lego form, but then you get some guys like Croc who look so goofy. I always enjoyed seeing how the devs were able to take a fan favourite character and adapt it to a tiny Lego man style. The sound design is another part that I have to give my compliments to. Basic sound effects sound good, but nothing is as satisfying as the sound of collecting a whole heap of studs, and it makes it so much more fun to do so. While there's no voice acting present to be able to comment on, The soundtrack is overall very solid, mostly thanks to the fact that almost all of the soundtrack is made up of tracks from existing Batman media, such as the movies. This game feels like it borrows quite heavily from the late 80s and the 90s era of Batman, both in its art and sound design. This game still carries a fair amount of the dark but silly tone that Batman media had at the time, and definitely has a very light-hearted version of a gothic vibe to it, which I really like for my Batman media. Before we move on to the conclusion for the review, if you've made it this far in the video, do me a little favour and subscribe to the channel. Any and all support helps a lot, and your sub will help me to get more videos out to you guys. To sum it up, LEGO Batman the video game is a cute little way to spend a good 10 to 30 hours depending on how much time you personally feel like putting into it. I can't say that the game is an essential experience in the video game canon, but if you like some LEGO and you like some Batman, then you may as well pick it up on a Steam sale sometime and give it a bit of a spin. When it comes to who I'd recommend the game to, the list pretty much comes down to LEGO fans, Batman fans, people who enjoy collecting things in platformer games, and people wanting a fun co-op lighthearted experience. If you don't fall into any of these categories, then this is definitely not an essential play, and you probably won't find something here that tickles you in particular. For positives, we have a funny and wacky lighthearted tone, solid Batman rogues representation, satisfying collectibles and mildly challenging puzzles to find them, a very high amount of replay value, good mission variety, good co-op design, and a fun slew of locations to be playing through. For negatives, we have quite basic platforming, incredibly simple and somewhat unsatisfying combat, a very bare-bones narrative with no dialogue, vehicle levels that are such a nightmare to control and play through that you wish there was a level skip option, partner AI that makes some basic puzzles a pain to complete, and the fact that the Robin in this game is Tim Drake. Plus, there's no checkpoints in levels, so when I had the boss fight of a 20-minute level bug out on me, I had to repeat the entire level from the start. Due to all these factors, I'll be giving LEGO Batman the video game a score of 6.5 out of 10. I know for a fact that LEGO games have grown and evolved a lot since 2008 when this title came out, and I've seen firsthand the quality that the modern titles have, so I'm still very excited to play through LEGO Batman 2 and 3 before the new one comes out this year. This was still a fun game, just definitely lacking in a lot of areas, and I feel like its age shows a lot more than other games from the 2000s. That's going to be it for the review, everyone. If you've made it to the end here, then thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. See ya!